Welcome, welcome. I think Discord is having some issues, so I'll have to do it without any notes this time around. Super useful. I think I'll just have to do it on the top of my head. It's my PC that's just dying. Can y'all hear me okay? Please? I think we should be good on the stream though. I think Discord is just giving up a little bit. So yeah, welcome back everybody to another WIP Wednesday. We're probably gonna keep it a little bit shorter this time around because we're flying out early tomorrow for our first community meetup. Hell yeah, gonna be awesome. I don't think we have too many people here today anyway that want to have a little bit of feedback, so it all works out. Oh, Discord still works on the phone. Let me grab some notes here, because I want to know what people have been asking about. Hey Joe Bates, welcome back. Let's have a look. Okay, we'll have to awkwardly do it like this until Discord decides to come back online. Build network error. Okay. Oh no, it's not even working on the phone. Damn it. Okay, I'll have to do my best to remember all the notes then. So here we go. Joe, since you're here, we're gonna start out with you, buddy. I see that you've added a nice little screenshot for your roughness as well, and I see that you tried some stuff. Yeah, it's not really doing that much, right? I think maybe something is going wrong in your lighting setup, because nothing is really being reflected back, right? Like we got some reflections here. Some reflections here. Right, you can kind of see it. But the rest of it is not really working out. So I think what we probably need to do here is somehow emphasize that we have reflections, right? So I think my go-to here, or like at least the thing that I would look into, is look into like an HDRI. Because if the scene itself is not really giving you that much information to use for reflections, right? Like an HDRI might help you. So an HDRI for reflections, because you have variation in here, right? It's just not really coming out the way that you wanted it. Feels very, very matte still, right? Like we're getting some really nice tones here, like on the door itself. The door itself is actually really nicely lit now. So I like what you did with that. It's just the rest of it, right? Like not really working out as I would have hoped it would be. And also what I wouldn't do is have a separation between like the panels like this, right? Try to think of them as like one material so that you have this material as like a continuous thing, right? Because you gotta think about it not in terms of like modular pieces, but in terms of like the materials, what they actually are, right? So this material is gonna continue between panels. What I would do is like the islands, right? Like this approach. That's pretty good, and you can probably vary that up between. Yeah, I think I can do that when I set up vertex painter for the roughness. Kind of a test for the moment. Yeah, that would still be like a good thing to keep in. It's all good. So that's something that I would look at. Also, there's also a setting. I don't know how much this is gonna help you, right? But in project settings, I think it is. It might be engine settings as well. Look for high quality reflections. That's really gonna boost like the quality of your reflections, and it's also really gonna help out with, yeah, any glass surfaces, right? So it's really gonna be apparent on this guy here, especially if you then combine it with like an HDRI so that it has something to bounce back. But yeah, look into that. That's probably gonna be quite nice as well. As for these reflections, yeah, not too sure. Like, I'm kind of thinking we need to go in Unreal for this, right? To actually have like a first-hand approach. But I think there might be something going wrong with like your lighting setup, or maybe the lighting setup is not really emphasizing the different bits of roughness as you kind of wanted it to show off, right? So that's why this whole thing doesn't really feel like it has improved in the meantime, even though I can see that you're doing stuff, right? Like there's a lot of variation here. It's just not really showing off in the actual screenshot. It still feels like very flat. But yeah, I would yeah, look into the HDRI first, see if that gives you like nicer reflections to play around with, and then see if you can then go in and like vertex paint with the roughness, that stuff. It's gonna be quite nice. Thinking. Okay, random question, Joe. Did you change your specular value at all? Or is it 0.5 on all of them? We'll have a look. Thanks. Because that's also something that can affect, like, affect the roughness, right? Or like, not the roughness, because they kind of change independently of each other, right? But yeah, it has an effect on how reflective a surface might appear. You do not have a specular map. There's nothing plugged into the specular. That's good, by the way, right? Like, normally, a specular, the base value for a specular in Unreal Engine 5 is 0.5. So if you have anything plugged in, that can cause issues then. If it's 0.5, that's good. Okay. Check. Just wanted to make sure that we checked that one off the box. Yeah. Cool. Is there... Another question for you. Is there a glass panel here? Like in this window frame? Or is that just like open? I'm just thinking about like an opportunity where it would be cool if you're gonna do like the high quality reflections and you're gonna add like an HDRI in it. It could be cool if that is glass as well. Like a very subtle glass panel in there, right? Just to give it some light. But that's more up to you. Or a suggestion rather than anything else. Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe. Like, Discord is still not responding. So if you... Maybe we're back? Oh, we're back. Mind. Okay, let me have a look at the post here. Okay, there's no direct feedback. I will try it out and see what it looks like. Yeah, I think could be interesting. Now onto the roughness, right? I think your roughness can still be improved a lot, especially where it comes to contact between surfaces, right? And I think that's what you're gonna do with the vertex paint setup, right? But like having spaces where you have like a dirt transition going up, so that you have at the bottom is like lighter in terms of roughness values compared to the top stuff, right? So that you get like a transition the two. Could be very interesting. So that's going to be real nice if you get that set up, because that's also going to add a little bit of life. And I think also just in terms of like the roughness variation, try to play more on this sort of stuff, right? Especially if you get the reflections working. Some stark contrast or like some leakage of something, right? Like we talked about before, is gonna play really nice. Because yeah, in general, right? If you look at this, and I know this is not the final thing, it feels very generic, right? Like the roughness map is the most important map that we should think about in terms of like our textures. And it's pretty generic at the moment. All that being said, oh yeah, I added some leaks on the right on the floor. Yeah, this stuff, right? This sort of stuff. Yeah, it's the same thing as here, right? And just a little bit of nice variation. Oh, this stuff in particular. No, because that's white. Yeah, so you got some dirt. That's starting to look real nice, you know? That you get like some surface breakup. That it doesn't feel really clean. So I like where that is going. I think you can easily have the dirt like more spread out. Like you're gonna do anyway. Just keep in mind, right, if we're nitpicking, that it doesn't always override like the nice models that you have here. So maybe have the decal be really small in terms of like height, and have it where it doesn't cross this lip and it's only affecting like the bottom surface. Could work really well for your environment. Because if you think about it, right? Like if you're walking here, like there's gonna be like lots of dirt and stuff like in this crevice and not necessarily on the top of it. Right? So you get that like nice transition. Again, contact between surfaces, right? If there's a crevice, like there's gonna be dirt in it. Yeah, I really like what you're doing with this space. You can really push that along the other sections as well. That's awesome. Love it. Yep. I also like what you did with the door. You know, like in terms of values, it's standing out quite nicely now. So great job on that too. Like what you're doing with it. Also, it is nice in terms of like contrast and shapes too. I like it. Like it. I think the only thing, and this is a tricky thing about like a scene like this, right? You kind of want to keep it relatively focused, is that if we compare the values between the guys up here, right, and then the door itself, like it feels like it's, you would almost expect the gardens or like the hydroponic station to be like more lit up than anything else, right? So there's like a logical break that happens. So I think you need to level up the lighting in that area a little bit, and make sure that it doesn't 100% take away from the back end, right? I think that's also why it's so interesting if you look at the concept that is probably the section that's lit up the most compared to the door, right? But yeah, think about that. But the rest of it looks nice, man. Great progress. And thanks for sharing your work again. Last 10%. Keep pushing it. I think I am close to finishing, but find the last 10% to be the hardest. So there is a saying when it comes to this stuff, right? Is that the last 10% takes 90% of the time. And it's true. To really get all the polish and all the finalization done and like really polish it up takes a lot of time compared to block outs and textures and all that stuff, right? Like it moves very quick. But like at the final point, you're really like fine-tuning things. Yeah, takes a lot of time. Don't think about the time, only think about the quality that is going to add to your performance. That's the only thing that you should worry about. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep it up. Nice. Will do. Thank you for the feedback. No worries. No worries. Thank you for sharing your work once again. Nearly there. Keep it up, buddy. Next up, we got Route 1 working on a cannon. Let me get some context here from the post. For the feedback, how is the overall asset looking? Let's see. So how is the overall asset looking? Will the mope method with the planes would work? Hold up. Are you talking about the mop here? Is that a mope? Is that a mop? Am I just missing the English vocabulary on my side? I'm not sure. I think that's what you mean, right? Because that's the only thing that I can think of that would probably be made with planes. So we're probably going to talk about that then. Will the fur method and then baking them onto planes create the brush effect? And anything that looks out of place? Is there anything that I need to do before I go into the sculpt? Let's see. Curious if you have some because we got a top view. So you're doing the shorter one, right? Because there's like a couple of different ones here. Let's see. Just comparing the two things here, right? So that's going to be sculpted then, assuming. There's nothing really immediately that jumps out. From just the looks of it, right? Like if you're going for the highest quality, or like the highest density, like what I would do is I would add these ribs in as well. They're tiny, right? But I think they can make a difference, especially because you're gonna show this close up, right? So those ribs could definitely be interesting to add. There's a ring on the inside here. Which is usually not the case, right? Like, yeah, you see here, like there's no ring on the inside because that's just wood going into wood, right? So you would have, I think the construction is something like this, right? So you have your peg coming from the core that goes into like the little wheel section, right? So this goes through the wheel, and then they what they do is they have like a peg that they drive in here, something like this. They drive that into the wood so that the wood splits open here and it becomes stuck because it's trying to push out, and it becomes stuck inside of this element, right? And then they reinforce that with like an iron plate on top of it. So they would have no like metal on this side, and you can actually see that it's quite curvy too. It's quite interesting. Yeah. Let's see. I think these feel a little bit too flimsy. They don't feel as sturdy as I would expect them to be. Move this inner lip. Add the ribs as well. You have like these like additional ribs that are added on top of it. We discussed before. But the rest of it looks solid though. Hi Vitali, thank you so much for subbing. Appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's more like general feedback, right? Let's have a look at some of the other questions here. Overall, it's looking pretty good. You know, I like it. A couple of proportional changes, and I think we're in a really good state, you know? Let's see. Yeah. Nice. I think these ones are probably They're probably gonna be flat, right? Flat or something else, or like flatten, something like that. They're probably not gonna be as round. I'm not too sure about the specifics, but I assume that they're not gonna be round. My assumption. Yeah, all good. So now we're gonna talk about this mop thing, right? Like the way that you would probably approach it to have it look good is exactly like you're saying, right? If we look at the top view, you would probably have something like this, right? Where these are like all just like individual cards with like a bunch of hair on it. That's the game approach, right? If you want to have it look like, ideally what you do, or like what you normally do, right, is for a normal game, you do just like a cross, right? Because a cross gives you like coverage from like all angles. So if you look in here, you get like the full volume. And if you look in here, you get like the full volume still. So a cross gives you like good cover from like most angles. I think if you want to make it look even nicer, you could add even more planes into it, right? To have that density there. And I think what could be nice is to I guess I'm trying to think, right? If you want to go for like a maximum quality, if this isn't working, right? For the view, so this is like option 1, right? If this isn't working, what I would probably try is to bake it onto cylinders instead. So the shape would be something like this, right? Where you have like a cylinder with like a cap on it or something like that. Something like that instead. The reason why I'm thinking that is because that's gonna give you like, we're basically trying to encapsulate like one of these sections, right? So like a section that is like that, and then you can have those cylinders and just scatter them on top of like the shape below it, and then we're gonna get something like this. And maybe you'll have to bake like, I think 1 is enough, maybe you do 2. That would probably, if this one doesn't work out, then I would probably go for like option 2 and give that a try. Pretty specific though to this, right? That's what I would try. They're sort of the same thing, right? I think with this one, you're just taking like a high quality approach to it. Where like you don't really care too much about like the geometry. You're just focusing on like the shape itself, right? But yeah. Yeah, that's the way that I would approach it. To answer your question. And then the rest of it, yeah. I think we kind of talked about like most of it, right? So I think it's good to go. I would probably look for more specific examples of this guy right here, right? If you can find them. So you can accurately like find like all these different bolts. Right? And like how specific they are. Like really go into like the nitty gritty of this stuff. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's looking good so far. Nice little project. I'm curious what you're gonna do with it, man. Be nice. And then we're moving straight on to Lazar. Let's have a look. questions would be, do you think it fixed the scale problem from last time? So he's talking in reference to like the flowers, right? Only got the flowers and a nice shader in for them thus far. The flowers, they don't really change any of the issues that we're having with the scale. The scale issue is still exactly the same because it's the grass and the flowers, right? Like the grass was the issue before. Right now, the flowers are the same kind of scale as the grass, so we didn't really change anything, right? I like that you added the flowers. They just need to be like way smaller if we want to have this thing look like really big. I think, let me give you a tip, right? Add a character in here. That's my hot tip to you. Oh, this is invisible. So that would be like my hot tip to you, because I think as soon as you're gonna see that you add like a character in here, right? Let's say this is wild grass, right? I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. Let's say it's wild grass and it comes up to like your knees, right? Let's say that the character is this big, maybe. Because if you start adding a character, you can see that this is pretty small, right? Especially compared to, again, the reference, right? Where you had this enormous portal. But yeah, long story short, I don't think this really changes anything to the scale problem at all. And then your next question is, should I maybe add more flower types? Again, same thing, right? Like the flowers are there to add variation to the foliage. It's not gonna fix the scale issue at all. Right? You can add more flower types. I think that would be quite nice, right? You can easily add like more variations as well if you wanted to. You can play around with that as much as you want, right? Like it's super flexible once you have one. But yeah, it's not gonna solve the scale issue. So in this case, what I would do is scale like the main structure up by like a ton, right? So that you have like the massive structure there and that you don't have to do anything about like the scale of the foliage. Depending on this character, right? If you add a character in here and the character is like super small, yeah, then we might have to change the scale of the foliage. But I don't think that's the case here. And also, I'm going to the sculpting phase next. Sculpting rocks in the middle pillars. I'm unsure though as to how to approach the little indents and carvings inside of them. Maybe you have small guidelines on how to make them. Small indents. Not sure what do you mean. For carvings? Oh, okay. So let's say you want to have like, I don't know, like a symbol on here, right? Let's say you want like the Beyond Extent logo on there. Let's imagine. The way that you would do that, if it's just gonna be like a shallow carving, like you're gonna sculpt that in the high poly, but then keep the geometry of the low poly flat, so that you're baking it onto like a flat section, right? If you're doing a shallow carve, you're doing it in the high poly only. If it is going to be really deep and it's going to have like an impact on like the whole look and feel, right? You have a couple of options there. Like if you're going to look at like a glancing angle and you really want to see that like, oh, I got carved into the rock. Then you can do it in the low poly, right? You can actually build that in to like the geometry itself, or you could potentially experiment with POM. But the easiest way is definitely going for the low poly, right? Straightforward option here. But that's the way that I would approach that. If you're talking about like small cracks and all that stuff, you can, the choice is up to you, right? Like you can do that in the sculpt and then bake it down onto a flat plane, basically like what we're saying here, right? Only do it in the high poly. You could also do that in Substance Painter or Designer, whatever you use for texturing, right? Where you just paint that in and you add like height information. That could also work. I think in general, if you make it in the high poly, it gives you the cleanest result. If you want to have flexibility, then you do it in your texturing program, right? That's the way that I would approach it. So that's it for the carvings. Yeah. I think about the scale stuff first, right? Try to figure that out first before you're going into sculpting. Really try to focus on the composition and the scale and all that stuff, because that's the core of the environment. See what you need to make that work, and then move on to the next steps. Yes, but keep it going, Lazar, and thank you so much for posting your work again. Appreciate that. And then we're gonna go straight to French fries. I think French fries, we haven't really seen you before. So welcome to your first work in progress Wednesday. Happy to have you here. And this scene is already looking really cool. So let's have a look. Let's see, so Magic Garden Shed. The central focus will be the bonsai tree. Nice. Center, so that makes sense. As it will undergo a dragon back. Right now I'm on the blockout phase and would appreciate feedback, particularly on the background around the bonsai tree. What can I do to create a better composition? I feel that the plants are a bit chaotic. Something feels off in the blockout, but I can't quite pinpoint it. Is the room too small, or are there too many plants? Use some extra. These are all separate questions, right? So I'm going through the questions first, and then we'll break it down a little bit. And then the third question is, what are your thoughts on the lighting, perspective, and overall shape language? And what is the first thing that catches your eye in the environment? So, okay, a whole bunch of questions here, right? And I'm gonna kind of address them all at once in a weird way, because they all kind of entangled inside of each other, right? We're gonna have a look at it. So, first question, well, like the main thing that I want to bring up is the composition, right? Probably gonna do that on separate layers because this is gonna be chaotic. So number one, composition. I think what you chose to have like the focal point in the middle, right, is super nice. But what you're doing at the moment is you're only making use of one of your artistic tools, and that is shape language, right? The lighting is very rudimentary. There's no colors, there's no textures, like you're only working with shapes, right? So keep that in mind as you're building a composition, because it's, in my opinion, like there's so much more to play around with than just the shape and like where the camera is. Let me give you an example, right? Like you could make, oh, actually, so don't do this too often, but I'm gonna give some examples from something that I've been working on myself, right? I want to give an example that's like really on the well. Okay, well, let me show you this one. Oh wait, drag it into here. honestly don't need too much from this. Right? Like, it could even be blurred, but you can still see what I'm doing, right? First off, we're seeing like a whole bunch of like lines, right? Like the composition itself is very contrasty, right? So we have like a lot of contrast between... Let's have a look. So we have a lot of contrast between darker shapes, right? Do something like this. Right? So we have a transition going from dark to light. And then on the border of that transition, what I'm doing is I put like a dark figure against a light background, right? So what we're doing here is I'm playing with the silhouette. I still don't know how to write that word. So we're playing with the silhouette of this character to become like the main focal point, right? So the way that I achieve that is, first of all, by thinking about like the main shapes, right? I'm playing with dark versus light, like contrast, right? So I'm putting that in there. Second, I overemphasize it by adding like little bits of fog right behind it. That's another technique, right? Then also what I'm doing is I'm being very on the nose with like the amount of attention that I want you to focus on the path itself, right? So we have this path going here, this path going here. Let's actually do another layer. So this path is going here. We've got a path going here. Like we've got this ledge over here. It's kind of pushing you towards it, right? So the way that I kind of look at it is I'm putting blockers in place where I want people to not get distracted too much, but I want them to focus on something specific. So the way that I look at this is not like a bunch of trees, but this is just like a blocking volume that I put in place. Same here, another blocking volume. Right? Because I don't want you to look there. This house, same purpose, right? That's blocking you from looking too much to the right. This tree, this thing, that's all just like purposefully blocking your way to like lead you towards the center, right? It's like everything is kind of guiding you towards the centerpiece. And then once you're in this zone, I don't really care where you go, right? Like we as humans are like attracted to other humans, especially faces, but even though you can't see them here. So this guy is going to stand out first, and then you're going to look at like some of the other people in the crowd. Maybe your eye is going to bounce here. I don't really mind where you're going to go at that point, right? Because you've already seen the main character. This is really on the nose, right? The way that I'm approaching this, I'm approaching it in like a very objective, like abstract way. I'm not looking at the individual assets. I'm looking at contrast and shapes and all that kind of stuff. Also, color, right? Like this guy has like an orange shirt, and then the rest of it is kind of green around it. Also helps. Contrast again. Yeah, all this said, right? Like, I did a very quick breakdown on how you can do something like this. But you can easily translate that to your environment as well, but you need to make sure that you use all the tools before you start thinking about like, oh, I think something's wrong, you know? That's all I'm trying to say here. So let's look at the shapes first. Right, I think, again, if you really wanted to play with it, right, like the thing that I would probably do is I want to have that contrast again, right? Like the windows in the back and then the bonsai in the front. I want to separate those two out. So what I'll probably do is make sure that the values of the bonsai, in this case, right, and this whole thing, really, I want to make sure that they stand against like what is going to be in the back. right? So I want to separate that out as much as possible. So the way that I can do that here, not really with the shape, right? Like if I wanted to do that with the shape, the effects on your environment would be too big. Because let's say, let's give you an example, right? If you wanted to do it with the shape, we would have to do something like this, where I'm gonna take your windows and I'm gonna make them really big, right? I'm gonna do something like this instead. Right, that would be like a very blatant use of your silhouette again, right? And like contrasting shapes, because now this entire thing, like the entire bonsai, is just standing on its own 2 feet, contrasted with like the background, right? You can kind of play with that too. But that could be an option, right? If you make the shapes bigger, but you don't necessarily want to do that because I like what we have going here. So we need to look for another tool. Another tool here could be to add like a little bit of fog separation between the two. Or do something with the colors, right? Where the separation between the 2 layers is going to be very obvious, right? So what I would say at this point is try to get your colors in first. See. And do like a quick pass, right? Just set up like a placeholder material inside of Unreal and just slap like a bunch of different colors on it and try to make it already work somewhat. Try to establish the colors that you're going to use. Hi Kiyu! I don't know if it's too late, but I just posted my WIP in the channel. That's awesome, Kiyu. Thank you so much for doing that. Unfortunately for this one, it is going to be a little bit too late. Also because I'm quite short on time. Because I have to get up at like 3 in the morning, which is like in 6 hours. So unfortunately, I'm probably not going to have time this week, but I'll happily review your work. So yeah, what I would do is come back to this, add textures, right? Like placeholder textures, start there. And then we're gonna see if we can like clean up some of the stuff here, right? But I don't think it's actually that bad. I don't think it feels too cluttered at all, you know? Again, that's also something that you're gonna notice with the textures. Once you start doing that, it's gonna be very clear if you need to reevaluate. Because then we're working with more information, right? But I don't actually think that it's too bad. I like the density that you have going on. Like as a gut feeling, what I would probably do is reduce this ivy and reduce this hanging plant, or like move that to somewhere else, right? Like this hanging plant would probably be good like somewhere on the sides where you can have it like draped like really long. You could almost use it as like a blocking volume, right? Or like a little bit of like a foreground element instead. I would probably move that there. And then the ivy is going to get pretty noisy, right? Because it's smaller, so it's going to have a lot of detail. So I would rather have it like on the sides rather than in the front, right? So I'm thinking that you could have like a lot of it here. You'd have like curtains of ivy if you wanted to, like on the sides. It would look really awesome. But then once you get closer to like the actual center of the piece, like keep it cleaner, right? And again, I'm thinking in shapes, right? Like I'm thinking about this ivy like it's like a solid blob that I can just like like place around and kind of have it like obscure sections where I don't want people to necessarily look that much. So it's like partially obscuring like the window here. That's fine. No one's gonna care about that. Same here. You know, it's partially obscuring the window. Totally fine. But then keep it clear from like the actual core section, right? Yeah. You can kind of see what I'm doing, right? Like I'm really thinking about like, okay, I want this main shape to stand out, so I'm gonna move the surrounding shapes that are like really noisy, probably take like a lot of attention to themselves. I'm just gonna move them to the side a little bit. Just open the center space up a little bit. Again, I want to re-emphasize, right? Like there's so many levers that you can push and pull here, where let's say you don't want to move anything in this scene. You can then use like lighting or colors to again do the same thing that we're doing here, right? Like make those things, make the ivy less noisy and make this thing like less noisy. There's other ways that we can do that, right? But like if you're talking about shapes, this is the way that I would approach it. Yes. And I like the framing that you have here, right? Because you have like these two blocking volumes that are like kind of pushing you towards like the middle of the frame. Clean that up a little bit. It's gonna look nice. Let's actually see what that looks like. So do like a really quick overpaint. Save that out. So if we remove some of this stuff, I just have another brush now. Okay. Okay, so trying to clear up those shapes so that the shape that we have in the corner or like in the middle is going to stand out more. Right. And that plant is not really that plant is not really bothering anyone, right? So that's cool. I can stay over there. Is that a pixel brush? I actually like it. Okay. So you see what I'm saying? Like, it's something to kind of back it up a little bit, right? Like, this is going to be something that you'll have to evaluate at like every step, because I think the core of it is in a really nice place. It's just you need to get like all the other components in there to like reestablish if it's still working out or not, and if you have to move things around, right? Oh. Yeah. Overall, really nice start to this piece though. I like where this is going. It's so fun to draw over it, you know? It feels like this is ripe for some really interesting compositional trickery, right? Where you make it feel like it's like a really nice piece just by itself. Yeah, I love the stuff that you have going here, like the foreground elements. Just by moving the ivy just a little bit, cleaning up some of the other sections, I think we're in a really good space. Cool. Let's see. Let's go over the questions again, right? Let's see if I missed something. So, how do I create a better composition? I feel that the plants are a bit chaotic. I don't necessarily mind that. Oh, talking about that, right? Since we brought up the concept of contrast, right? We talked about contrast in this little section. There's also a contrast between, you could have the rest of your scene be like really chaotic, and then have the bonsai tree because it's a symbol of inner peace, right? Like have that as like a serene counterbalance towards like the chaos of the rest of the scene, right? You can do some like really interesting storytelling with that by just having those two. So I actually think that works quite well in this case, where you have the contrast between the two. Yeah, let's have a look. What are your thoughts on lighting, perspective, and overall shape language? I think it's good. You know, it's very straightforward. I think what I would do is think about the aspect ratio of your shot, right? Because right now, it's kind of squarish. Squarish never really works when you're doing a presentation. So keep it like rectangular, either like this or do it like the opposite way, right? If you want to have a taller shot, that could also work, or have like a landscape shot instead. That's what I would think about. So it could actually be quite nice for you. I guess both can work, right? Like if you were to extend the shot and then have like a carpet leading into the space or something like that, that could work. If you go wider, you just have to do like more set dressing on the windows, and you could clutter that up with like more ivy to kind of push the feeling of like having it in the center. But yeah, that's the thing that I will say, just the aspect ratio. And what's the first thing that catches your eye in the environment? Currently it's a mixed bag, but that's just purely because we don't have any textures, right? Well, maybe not purely. I think if you wanted to overemphasize, right, like make more use of this light that you have here and really have it shine onto this thing, that could work really nice as well. Because right now, most of the light is coming from outside, right? But it could be nice if you have that light hanging there anyway, to have like a spot highlighting the bonsai as well. Could work really nice since you have it there already. And then how can I make the bonsai tree stand out more? That's kind of what we discussed the entire time, right? Like all this stuff is linked to like how can you make like the focal point of the scene stand out more than it does now. So yeah. Lots of levers that you can pull, right? Add the placeholder textures, experiment with the light a little bit more, and just work from that point on. And like reevaluate whenever you do like a big step, right? And then just think about it a little. But yeah. Awesome scene though. Like, I like where this is going. A great choice for the execution. And the block out is already looking really solid. So I'm really curious where this is going to go, French Fry. Really curious. So yeah, I'll be following this one. And again, to come back to the beginning, welcome to the community. Thank you for sharing your work as well. Moving along, we have George. George is back. How are you doing? Get some context on the camera. Am I being too perfectionistic? Any feedback about it? Last week I said I don't want to make any big changes, but I want to push this to the highest quality that I can. So I would appreciate any further feedback regarding the materials. Yeah, so I'm not going to linger on this too much because I think, honestly, most of what I said is reflected in last week's session, right? It's I think if we do like a quick recap, I think the textures are currently missing like a sense of layering, right? Like if you look at the, if you look a little bit closer. So if you look at this section, right? Like I love that you have the letter and like the, what is it? Like the top part of the letter and like the broken bits of the letter, right? But if you actually look at like a strap, like it's not just gonna be faded out like you have it here, right? You know, go back to like a normal. It's not just gonna be like a little bit of a fade out, right? There's gonna be different transitions depending on what kind of thing caused it to be there in the first place, right? So what I mean by that is that there's gonna be on this side, right? Because this is squished, like this fold is so strong, you're probably gonna have like tears in the fabric here, right? You're gonna see like a lot of tearing, and then where it's more like this, just from like holding like the thing, right? Like you're gonna see like more of the damage that you have now, but those are like two different ways that a prop can be damaged, right? So think about that as you're doing it. Then also, let's see, so we have layering up here. I think we talked about like subtle layering specifically, right? So subtle. Tatoon, can you please tell me the difference between sheen and coat? No, I cannot, because I honestly don't know. Thanks for the question, though. Hi, Andrea. Welcome. How are you doing? We're just talking about like subtle details on this camera, right? For example, this is not what you would define as subtle, right? We have like a very stereotypical like swipe of like fingers. That is not really how it would look, right? Like, how did they get here? Like, think about like the interaction that must have happened. Like, is this the only way that I can think about this is, oh my god, let's say you're holding the camera and I'm like, give me that, and I'm trying to take it from you, but you like pull away at the last second and like 3 of my fingers like hit the camera, right? Like that sort of interaction doesn't really feel natural here, and it's also like a bit too, it's too much. It's too much and like too intense. Right, so you kind of, I do have to say, I like where this is coming from, right? Because you wanna add like subtle details, like we were talking about last week, right? Where it's like the oils from your skin have affected like this fabric over time, but that's something that is really subtle, right? Like it's something that is like a very subtle transition, and it's not going to be as strong as here. I think the way that you get away with this, if you have like lots of roughness variation when it comes to like different skin oils and like subtle layers, and then you do a layer like this, maybe you can get away with it, right? Because it blends in, it has a transition between all the other layers. Same here, right? Like we got, oh wait, no, actually I have a better example. Same here, right? Full fingerprints. And honestly, you're doing a better job here of like cleaning them up, right? But still, you're not gonna see like a full fingerprint, right? So what's gonna happen is you're gonna have like maybe like a partial fingerprint. Or maybe like a swipe, right? Like a fingerprint that's like smudged. So you're seeing the edge of the fingerprint, but the rest of it is kind of smudged. Kind of like you're doing here. Right? But then a little bit, again, subtlety. Subtlety is key here. And also, you have this guy, and then this guy is sort of the same rotation. Too similar. Right? We're really, really looking at like all the details here. I was finishing this, right? So yeah, like a swipe. Is that leather or felt? I think it is leather. Mistaken. There might be like a specific name for it, but let's see. Trying to look for like a good example, right? But it's gonna be tricky. Oh, this is live, lol. Heyo. Hi, Darian. Welcome to the chat. I'm just looking for fingerprints now. Let's see. Yeah, or even this one, right? I'm gonna bring this one up. They are full fingerprints, right? But even this has like a lot of detail where it's like partially swiped, like partially blurred, like there is a layer to it, right? Rather than like a full fingerprint. I know I'm going into like a crazy amount of detail about like stupid fingerprints on like a camera, right? But this, if you're doing something of this high quality, this is what people are gonna set their expectations on, right? Like they wanna really see all those details too. Yeah. Take it into account. So, yeah. This is what I would say, right? Like, really think about the layering. Like, think about, like, all the layering aspects. I think you were also talking about the letter, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe we can talk about that for just a little bit as well. Like this pattern. You need to break that up somehow. Because it feels too generic and it feels too procedural, right? And this, again, we're looking at the details, right? If we like make a couple of variations and then blend between them. And really, really pay attention to like what this stuff looks like in, let's see, images. Pretty. Yeah, because I feel if you're trying to simulate something like this, right, then yours is too strong of an effect. That in mind. Keep that in mind. It looks good from certain angles, right? But this angle is really not selling it. Because, you know, like if the lighting isn't like overemphasizing it too much, then this looks decent, right? Like the contrast isn't too strong. But yeah, on like sections where you have shots like this, like it feels really apparent. Yeah, like I was saying before as well, stuff looks freaking awesome, right, George? So I know that I'm being very picky about like the amount of feedback that I'm giving you, and I'm being very specific. But that's, again, only because I can, right? Like, the amount of details and the amount of attention that you're paying to the details warrants me, or like gives me an excuse to be like very specific about it. Yeah. Add like I think a layer of dust be added in here, right? So you have small dust and large dust, right? So you have like bigger particles and then you have like smaller just coat of just like dust. Maybe there's even like hairs. You know, this is what I'm talking about with like details, like these tiny layers where maybe you're gonna have like one hair, you know, that's just like in the middle here. That's it. Really subtle details like that are gonna really sell it. Yep. Okay, George. Good luck. I'm looking forward to seeing this going forward because, yeah, as I said, this is freaking awesome so far, right? So keep it up. I know that you really want to push yourself, and I can see that you're doing it as well. So keep that up. Keep pushing it, and the best of luck, buddy. Best of luck. Cool. And then the last one we have here from Jake Benbow. Welcome to the chat as well. Sorry that I'm only replying to you now. Let's have a look at your post. See Spoon Cafe. Got this junction box. I feel like it's nearing the end. There are a few more props I want to tackle. Mainly the tabletop stuff. Stuff like plates and cutlery. But other than that, I think it's close. I'd be interested to see if anyone has any ideas on finishing touches. Hey, Connor! Welcome to the chat, buddy. Loving all the streams so far, Tim. Thank you so much. Happy you enjoyed them. How are you doing? I'm gonna be looking at Jake's work here. BT Spoon Cafe. Alright, so Jake is looking for some like finishing touches, right? I love the lighting. I love the approach that you're taking, right? Like, there were a couple of like zoomed in shots that I didn't for some reason. Don't know why. Just add one here, right? So that we can look at like a nice zoomed in shot as well. Oh. No, I moved the whole thing. Hey. There we go. Okay, so this is the detail that we're working with, right? Like I love the junction box. I think if you want to go for the style like this, it needs to be implemented on the smaller details as well, right? This is the first thing that really stood out to me. Like really, that's the first thing that I saw at least on the stream. Is that these papers, they kind of feel flat. Especially these two, right? I like that they have like the model is great, right? But they don't feel like they have like the same textured feel like the other ones. That's like the first thing that I stumbled upon. They're also like pretty white, right? So just breaking them up with like a bit more of that stuff, a bit more of your texture stuff. because I love it so much. I think you can implement that on probably all of the posters now that I'm looking at it. I mean, some of them don't necessarily need it, right? But it could still be nice to just break them up a little bit. It's nice. Yeah, I do like the feel of this place though. Looking real nice. So we're looking for small wins, right? Finishing touches. Okay, let's see. You have these screwed into the floor, right? But are they missing here? Maybe it's just a bit small. That's one thing that kind of stands out to me. I mean, obviously this is still placeholders, so that's not done yet. The chairs look freaking awesome. I like what you did with those. I think what can really add like a ton of life is... And you know what you could try is decals, right? For the floor. Let's see. Yeah, like decals for the floor, right? Where you have like the sides of the walls where they touch the floor. But the way that I would do the decals is again in your style, right? Like have them as like painterly brushes and just add them as like a slight blend or like a slight transition from one place to the other. To look really nice. So that could look really nice. Let me actually make sure that we grab some notes, right? So decals for the floor. Probably super tiny. Too bad. Decals for the floor. Chair bolts. I know that this is a smaller one, so make of that one what you will. Also do the same thing with... Just love the misalignment on this little section of the tiles. Looks so good. But yeah. Apply the same thinking when it comes to the roof panels as well. Right? You can have like an easy win where you just push in, or you just have like a little section that's missing from one of these roof tiles. Like fake ceiling panels, I guess. And maybe... I don't know. It can be very subtle, right? Like it could be like literally this guy that has like half of it missing. But since it's so far into the corner, like it just adds like a little bit of detail. Or what you could also do is take one of these panels, cut it out in geometry, and just literally move it up a bit, right? And then extrude the edges of the metal just a tiny bit so that you get the feeling that that is actually like a solid thing, right? Because I'm assuming that this is a material, right? But yeah, you can easily get away with that by just like extruding like a little lip, pushing the panel up a little bit, like slightly misaligning it, giving it like a little... I keep calling them like character details, right? Like you're putting the character into the environment. Character details. So one thing we discussed here was the roof panels, right? I'm gonna bring up some other stuff here as well. Same thing what you did here, right? This cable could have gone straight, but it doesn't. Freaking love this cable. Apply the same thing with this one, right? Let's see. There's like a slight bend in here, which is quite nice. So this is like an interesting tip. The way that I kind of approach this is I always try to show, like, again, the cause and effect, right? So what the cause and effect would look like for something like this is you have like, oh, you got like a little bit of a bend here. Cool. That bend stops at like a little, what are those? Like ball pin or whatever. Right? And you have like, let's say, another one here. And then right before this corner, because this corner is just like floating in midair. And it's also not like PVC tubing, right? Because PVC tubing would have like a different lip or something like that. But for these guys, we can just add like these little clamps to the wall. And then in between the clamps, do the same approach as you're doing here, right? Where it kind of just like slightly bends down or like is slightly crooked or whatever. Give it a little bit of character. Easy wins, right? Because this is literally just like a small piece that you model. You might... I'm trying to think. You might even be able to reuse it from somewhere else. You can be creative with this stuff, I would say. Yeah, this stuff adds a lot. And then you just have like 2 of them over here. Maybe put that one like a bit higher. You can tell how much I love this stuff, huh? Gonna have like little clamps everywhere. Do the same thing here. Maybe thinking, right? Because you got little bits of tape. If that tape is like a piece that you just mapped on like a separate section on your UVs, you could probably use a little bit of tape to just like fasten it to the wall here. You know? That we're not using the same kind of clamps, but they actually just like stuck it with like a bit of tape to the wall. Or you could use the clamps, you know. Let's see. Yes, this is the stuff that I like. What I would also try to do... Jesus loves you. Love that. You have these awesome posters, right? These awesome frames that you have on the wall. Tell a story with them, right? I know that this is just supposed to be like generic pictures from like potentially the family that owns it, right? And I know that you're probably also using like royalty-free images or whatever, right? If you're concerned about that. What actually could be really interesting is, I don't know if you have access to this, right? But if you have travel pictures from yourself, do the same kind of approach, right? But I think what really helps here is that you have consistency between the people that are in the pictures, right? So that you as a viewer could actually look and say like, hey, look, this picture from us two on vacation is really nice, but then this is our car, you know, and then this is us on vacation. Hey, this is awesome. It doesn't have to all be that, right? And then you can sprinkle it up with like, I don't know, friends of yours or family, right, in like smaller frames. You could kind of turn that into I don't know, you can turn that into like all kinds of interesting things, right? Where you could have like a sandwich eating contest and then you have the winners on the wall or something. It depends. It kind of depends on how comfortable you are with like using your own personality in it, right? And the reason why I'm saying your own personality is because that's one that you have access to of like a kind of library, right? You can still blur it out. Still do the same sort of like stylized treatment as you're doing on these pictures. And then have like a wall of like personalized images of you, but also people that own this restaurant that wanna give it like a really nice and like homely feel. Yes. Yes. Okay, so storytelling with frames, right? Be awesome to do something there. And then the last thing that I'll say about like the character, like adding character, right? I probably see like another opportunity here where one of these planks could be like bent in or something. Right? Or like maybe, I don't know, slightly broken. Maybe slightly broken makes more sense. And again, no need to make that in a texture, right? You just do that in geometry. You cut like a section out, you push that in. Maybe you just slap like another texture behind it so that it looks like a little bit darker. Oh, well, sorry. Kind of have one here. Yeah, I think something more like that, actually. It's nice. Add that in like another place and I think you're good then. Yeah, and then last thing that I'll say is, it's again decals, right? But like having a decal that has like a slight transition, ever so slightly, right? Going from like a dark edge here going up. You would have like a gradient transition going from like dark to up. And I'm talking about like really slight transitions, right? So if I were to do that, I love this one. There's no food on the plate, even some sauce residue. Oh shit. Yeah, that's actually a good point. A little bit of sauce sprinkled on there could be nice. Sorry. Away instead. Like a... It's very slight, right? Like I'm talking about like very slight adjustments, like wherever you have the transition from like basically wherever like dirt crawls into crevices, right? That's where I would do this kind of approach. Kind of have these transitions like between all of it. Yeah, man, I'll leave it at that. I think honestly the biggest difference here is gonna be focusing a little bit more on the floor, the ceiling, and then these character details, right? Like the character details, they're gonna make so much of a difference when it comes to like the zoomed in shots, right? Because you're gonna actually have like all the things that make like logical sense. Right? You could even play around with like these stupid clips that I've drawn, right? You could even have like one of them loose. That you have, what would that be? Still holding on for dear life, but it's like barely doing so. You can see like the bolt still going into it. You have like the cable sticking out that way. Hey Puns! Welcome back. Yeah, the sauce residue is actually like a really interesting point, so... Or just like smudges, right? Like, especially with the one in the foreground. Smudges! It's a really good point. Awesome, really great pointers. Definitely stuff that I can iterate on. Yeah, this is the thing, right? Like these, I was really focusing on like quick and easy wins for you. Like all this stuff is really pushing. Oh, plans for baked bean juice. Ugh. Anything food related, some leftovers, etc. Yeah. Yo, Scott is excited about the baked bean juice. Okay. I mean, it does really fit the location well. Let's be honest. Like that would be on point. But yeah, lots of small wins here, right? Lots of easy stuff that you can do. Like you can cobble stuff together. You can make it look really interesting. Or like even more interesting than it already does, right? Because I love the style that you've chosen. Like I love your approach to it as well. And yeah, the attention to details and the way that this feels, super cool, man. Super cool. Nice one. Hey, NPC Liam! Great job, Jake. Love this environment. It's coming from Aaron Smith. Thank you so much for saying that, Aaron. Yeah, this is freaking awesome. Look at this. I'll show it off once more. Look at how good that looks. Details on that are nice. And the thing that I also like, I know it's a tiny thing, but like you still have like the metallic stuff underneath it, right? Like it kind of has that like blend between like stylized and PR. You know, it's very painterly, but also still realistic in that way. Life is Strange 1 vibes. Yeah. Like Into the Spider-Verse as well, right? Probably like a little bit less chaotic than Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah. It's awesome. Great job on this one, Jake. Oh, last thing. This is gonna be a tricky one. I don't feel... I do this. I don't feel that the stylization of the images necessarily works as well as the stylization of your textures. But I'm kind of grasping in the dark, right? Because I know how you did it and it kind of works good as a base, but I think... Man, how would you do it? It's art styles into frames. Oh, I guess you could play that card. Yeah, I can see that. But I think the way that I would probably approach it is to get these images into Substance Designer and then smudge them up there. See what that gives me? Oh. And then do like Piano paintings, I'm not a 2D artist at all, so it's difficult for me to bring them up to the same level as the rest of the scene. Yeah, so that's why I'm thinking in Substance Designer terms, right? Because the way that I would probably approach it is... Because these are black and white anyway, right? So if you drag them into Substance Designer and then do like slow blurs and all that kind of stuff on it to kind of match it more with the style that you have with your paintings, maybe overlaying on top of it with like certain filters could really work as well. And then after the fact, like you could still bring them back in and maybe do a the like a gradient color, gradient map. I think it's called different in different programs. To get some color back in. Yeah, it's gonna be a difficult one to kind of massage them into the style that you've set for yourself. So, yeah, good luck. Or maybe another approach. You go for like I've redone them since then and they're slightly better. A little. Oh, okay, cool, nice. I was just about to say maybe what could work, because the posters themselves, they're also like realistic, right? So maybe it could also work if you push them more towards realism rather than the stylization. Not sure. Just thinking out loud here. It could be a word to try, right? But it would look weird. Weird. Oh. It's given up on. Cool. Thank you so much, Jake. Thank you for posting your work. And this is freaking awesome. Hey, Jeremiah. How's it going? It's going good. It's going good. I think this is perfect timing for me, though, because I need to go. So I'm gonna say thank you, everyone, for posting your work. I'm sorry to cut this one a little bit shorter, but I do need to get up in like, is it 6 hours or something like that? Because we're heading over to London for our first meetup. It's gonna be awesome. So I'm gonna cut it short here. For the people that are gonna be at the meetup, I'll see you there. I'm freaking excited to see everyone there. It'll be awesome. And yeah, to all the other people, I'll see you next week. Next week, Wednesday. Usual time, usual place. Happily have you back. Alright, I'm popping out, people. Stay creative, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.